must break the 8 years of impunity and waste. Yes, we must break the 8 years of poor governance. Yes, we must break the 8 years of arrogance.
Hello there, welcome to yet another exciting edition of Let's Talk Ghana here on Studios 2 Television. This is the show where we put Ghana first in all of our conversations. Coming up today, blackouts expected during peak hours in the coming days if it hasn't already started, as shortfalls in gas supply means that generation capacity has suffered. We get explanations from the various sector players as to why exactly it is that we're seeing this. And much later, government accused of wasting $3 million on new STEM schools instead of upgrading already existing ones. We get a response from the Education Ministry. If you stay with us here on Let's Talk Ghana, like I always say, this is the show where we put Ghana first. We're back shortly. Right, you're welcome back to Let's Talk Ghana. Like I always say, this is the show where we put Ghana first in all of our conversations. It airs every Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays on Studios 2 TV, on YouTube, as well as on Facebook. Well, on today's edition of the show, it doesn't look like it's such great news because the expectation going forward is that during peak hours, and what is peak hours? 7 o'clock to about 9 p.m., there's a likelihood that your lights could go off. Why is this? That's because there's been a shortfall in gas supply from the Tuaba gas processing plant and the West African gas pipeline, also known as WAPCO. Well, if you do not know, they are responsible for providing gas to a number of thermal plants which we run in the country, which generates electricity, which is then sent to the Ghana Grid Company, which is Gridco. They forward it onwards to the Electricity Company of Ghana, and then ECG distributes it to our various homes. So now that WAPCO and Etiabo, who are supposed to be giving gas to the processing plant or the energy generation plant, for instance, Sunon Asogli, AXA, and the likes, just not to bore you with a lot of the names, they are not receiving the needed gas, and so their plants are shutting down. That means that they cannot give electricity to Gridco for Gridco to forward onwards to ECG, and then ECG will forward it to your homes. And so there's been a drop of about 650 megawatts of power, which is substantial in terms of peak hours. That's 7 to 9 p.m. thereabout, where a lot of people are home, are watching television, are engaged using electrical gadgets and the likes. Those are peak hours. And so due to a 650 megawatt shortfall, lights could go off. What has the various sector players been saying? We'll start off from Gridco, who issued a statement late Friday night, and that statement is coming on your screens right about now, and just walk you through it, where the Ghana Grid Company, who is the operator of the National Interconnected Transmission System, is informing the general public, we've been telling you about it already, that there's a deficit in thermal power generation due to limited gas supply from Etiabo and then the West African gas pipeline, also known as WAPCO, and it's created a shortfall of 650 megawatts at peak time, which will affect consumers in some parts of the country, primarily Accra, because if you look at the grid and where energy is consumed a lot, for instance, if you go to East Legon, there are really high-rise areas and an area where there's a lot of pomp and pageantry. These areas could suffer blackouts. You can talk about other areas like Ablekuma and the likes, which will suffer blackouts. And so primarily, a lot of the blackout will be expected within Accra, and it will mean that when you get back from work, you cannot enjoy electricity. Let's just end that statement from Gridco. It says, every effort is being made to restore gas supply from Etiabo as the situation improves, power will be restored to affected customers. It's from the communications department of the Ghana Grid Company. Well, just as they issued their statement, nobody wants to take blame for why your power has gone off. And so ECG as well did their best to sort to also offer explanations from their side as to why your lights could be going off from now till we don't know when gas is restored from Etiabo and then WAPCO. So that ECG statement as well is coming up on your screens now, and it reads that the Electricity Company of Ghana apologizes first off to cherished customers and the general public who are experiencing power outages in various parts of the country. And like I said, it's due to supply challenges emanating from a power failure at a Etiabo gas processing plant and then WAPCO. As a result, all Asogli Phase 1 units, Send Power and AXA, remember some of the plants I mentioned, they've shut down, leading to a generational shortfall. The Ghana Gas has assured that it will resolve the issue as soon as possible. That's the challenge. Jesus Christ said he was coming soon. It's been 2,000 years. And so as soon as possible, it's not quite well known, but they will make sure that power is restored fully by about 9 p.m. as at Friday. But going forward, the expectation is that your lights could be going off. Well, after the two statements from ECG and then the Ghana Grid Company, that's Gridco, the West African gas pipeline was forced to also issue a statement on Saturday. And let's just walk you through what their version of the story is. We're just seeking to get an understanding as to why your lights will be going off, and then you get a fair understanding so as you don't call the call center of the Electricity Company of Ghana to blast them just a bit too much. So WAPCO, they've issued a statement as well, the West African gas pipeline. They say that the attention has been drawn to press releases by Gridco citing limited gas supply from them and from the Electricity Company of Ghana citing their technical challenge as contributing to power challenge being experienced in the country. They wish to set the record straight that they do not have any technical issues and their facilities are fully available to deliver gas. Now, WAPCO transports gas based on its agreement with gas shippers. These shippers purchase gas from gas suppliers, transport the gas via WAPCO pipelines, and then sell the natural gas to gas off-takers, mainly power companies. Now, when the agreed volume of gas is made available, WAPCO dutifully transports it to the shippers' customers. The challenge yesterday was that the Ghana National Gas Company's plant at Etiabo went down, and therefore there was no gas available for WAPCO to transport. And so everybody is labeling blame in one way or form. But what this means is that going forward, until all of the challenges are resolved, then power supply will be unstable. That's the explanation as we had it from Friday. We await to get a lot more details as to exactly what it is that is happening on the power front. For a lot of the energy experts, particularly Bright Simmons, for instance, he makes the argument amongst many things that the blame game can go on, but money needs to be available, and then a relook at the country's energy sector. There's been a lot of talk about energy reforms. If you recall, we brought you details and even spoke to an expert in the energy space about government's plan to reform the energy sector. Tariffs are expected to continue to go up so that the Electricity Company of Ghana can pay off the energy generators so that we can have a good enough space, a good enough balance within the energy sector. As and when there's a bit more, we'll provide details for you. But we're going on a break. When we return, we'll veer into education, where government has been advised that, yes, you're setting up new schools, STEM schools, with about, $3 million US, but what about upgrading existing ones? The Education Ministry will provide a bit more explanation as to why. Stay with us. This is Let's Talk Ghana. Right then, you're welcome back to Let's Talk Ghana here on Studios 2 Television. Just before we went on that break, I was talking to you about what, can we call it accusations? But yes, Bright Simmons, who's the Honorary Vice President of Imani Africa, put up a post where he, amongst many things, said that government has secured a $3 million loan from the Arab Bank to set up schools specializing in science and tech, but makes the argument that yes, it's great, but could the money have been used to beef up already existing ones? So that's the concern that he's raised, and the Education Ministry has been responding to that. They put up a lengthy press release, but we're not going to read releases for you. Let's get on the telephone line. Akwesi Kwate, he's the public relations officer of the Education Ministry. He joins us on the telephone line with a bit more on this and then explanations. What really is the money being used for, and what's the end goal for $3 million? Mr. Kwate joins us on the telephone lines now. So explain to us, is it a case that new schools have been set up as has been suggested by Mr. Simmons?
Okay, very well. So, I think first of all, it is important for us to remind ourselves what Mr. Simmons said. And I feel and I believe that as critics, we must not hasty to criticize. But of course, we see his criticism as a good feedback for all of us, particularly when it comes to the development of education.
Right.
Just that we would have felt that, as a senior citizen and knowing his caliber and his research background, at least would have taken the step to, if not for anything at all, make the necessary inquiries from the Ministry of Education to ascertain the validity of the claim that he was making. Because, clearly we look at the validity of the claim that he's making from the Ministry of Education. We believe that it is misleading and, if you like, unfounded. Particularly if you look at the fact that he said that a loan of $3 million was secured from the
Arab Bank.
Yes, indeed, some loan facility has been secured from the Arab Bank by the government of Ghana. But again, if you look at, the context where he put it, and then the approach where he said as though the government secured a loan to build STEM schools, it is unfactual. Because as part of the basic education support project, which consists of the building of schools and improving them at the basic level, this facility was actually secured to help in that regard.
So these are not these projects that we've seen. They are not senior high schools, but rather basic schools.
No, what I'm saying is that in terms of the facility that he's referring to, it is not the facility that was used to build the senior high schools that he's alleging to.
Okay.
I think that is the first correction that we have to make. But beyond that, of course, he also makes some outstanding revelations, even though it looks profound. It's not also entirely accurate, especially when he sought to suggest that the Ministry of Education has overlooked existing STEM schools in the country and now only invested in building new ones. And so he sought to suggest that there was a misplaced priority, especially knowing that, you could improve existing ones and then just beginning new structures all over. Right. But that is also not even the case, because existing schools have been upgraded. And then if we look at some of the existing schools that has been upgraded, some of them even with very newly built science laboratories. You look at institutions like Lashibi Community Day School, St. Louis, Okuapeman, St. James, Accra Academy, Anglican and Co, Anglican SHS, and Brook Girls and Co, and even Wesley Girls. These are schools that have received a facelift when it comes to even massive infrastructure, particularly in the areas of STEM. Of course, he also mentioned institutions like PRESEC as a basis of for
making the argument.
His allegation. But of course, if you go to PRESEC right now, Mawina, you can visit there with your cameraman tomorrow. PRESEC has a science laboratory, an ultramodern one, which is about more than 90% complete. Just like schools like Oyoko Community SHS, Opokuware SHS, and also Efiokubi. But of course, I mean, there's also one important thing that he also said, which I felt was quite unfortunate and low. Mr. Simmons was like, if you look at the perceived rural advantages associated with the location of the newly contracted STEM schools, I think he cited the Pesenke one.
Yeah,
as a misplaced priority. And the basis was that a school like that was also supposed to be situated there.
Struggling for students.
Probably in Kumasi or in Accra. We felt it was so low and very unfortunate because, I mean, if you look at these schools, particularly the fact that he used as enrollment as his basis of argument, even indeed, the enrollment that we were expecting has actually, the schools have been oversubscribed. And so, I mean, it speaks volumes about the increasing recognition and demand for quality STEM education in even rural areas. And of course, if you look at the directive principles of state policy and the fact that education has to be, in terms of access, has to be extended to all Ghanaians, irrespective of where they are coming from. I mean, you do not necessarily have to deprive somebody of a state-of-the-art facility just because the person is coming from Pasimpe or Mampusi. So we feel that the establishment of these STEM schools have been vindicated. I mean, the government pointed again shows and demonstrates a proactive approach to bridging the the gap and providing equal opportunities for students also in rural communities. Besides, these are schools which are burdened and ancillary facilities. So, I mean, it doesn't really matter where somebody is coming from. As part of promoting our cultural cohesion, you can even have students from Accra visiting Pasimpe, just like we have students from the north, I mean, schooling with PESEC. So we felt that it was misplaced.
Right.
And so, I mean, for us in the Ministry of Education, our point is that his allegations regarding Ghana's approach to education development and the use of funds obtained from the Arab Bank in Sudan is misleading. Largely because, I mean, first of all, like I earlier indicated, the loan facility was not used for the setting up of STEM schools, but rather it was used to enhance accessibility and quality education at the basic level. And then, quite apart from that, I mean, the other wild claim that he made, that, I mean, we have neglected existing STEM schools at the expense of the construction of new STEM schools is also quite unfounded. And the evidence that also supports that, especially having listed some existing schools. See, I mean, most of these critics, they feel that the fact that you are doing something new only means that you've neglected the existing ones. I mean, the two can still move together.
Right.
You do not necessarily have to finish the new one before you come back to the existing one, and the vice versa. The two can move together.
Right. Then.
And that is what the Ministry of Education is doing, because we don't believe that whilst we are also, geared towards providing 21st century education, we should also neglect the existing schools. And so we can, same way, we can also not be retooling the existing schools whilst we are also missing out on providing 21st century education to our people.
So just briefly and finally, overall, you would say that the level of STEM education that was seen in the country now, how would the ministry want to rate itself? Because STEM appears to be quite important these days.
I mean, let me say that, these policies directly or indirectly, whether we may like it or not, has some political connotations within the background that there is political parties that actually give birth to these policies. And then when it comes to implementation, to ultimately government takes, the final responsibility.
Right.
If you look at the MPP's manifesto, for instance, that is the government that I serve in, they promise free SHS. At no point did they ever even promise STEM education. And so for me, if you ask me, STEM is even a bonus and an addition to the free SHS program.
Right, then.
And it shows the proactiveness of the government. It shows the proactiveness of the Minister for Education, Dr. Sedwichum, and the Ministry of Education that we serve as a way of realigning and repositioning Ghana's education system to meet the 21st century education. So if you ask me, yes, we should be proud of ourselves as a country. And of course, in terms of the rating, I'm unable to put percentage figures on it. But I'll say that as a country, we should be proud of ourselves.
Mr. Kwarteng, I appreciate that you could speak to us.
Thank you.
That's Akwesi Kwarteng. He is the Public Relations Officer of the Education Ministry. We're going for a short break. When we return, floods wreaked havoc in parts of the country, Ho to be precise, as it rained heavily on Saturday all across the country. We get details shortly. You're welcome back. So, like I was saying, floods wreaked havoc in the Volta regional capital, Ho, while it rained all across the country on Saturday. And videos that we've seen here at Studios 2 Television, quite damaging. Properties and individuals. If you're very familiar with Ho and even the Ho Poly area, that's the Ho Technical University now. You see that the road headed towards Nogora and the likes were all inundated with flood waters, and pretty interesting, not really interesting, but pretty worrying, I should say, the development from there. Right, let's veer into the realms of politics now. And on Friday, we told you about how the race for who becomes the flag bearer of the governing New Patriotic Party was fast heating up after comments by the vice president during his campaign tour in the Ashanti region. Well, on Friday, the Alan team, they ended their campaign in the Greater Accra region, and they responded to the comments that Ndro Biaso, and so nobody can state a claim to wanting to become the de facto leader of the NPP ahead of that primary. Yaboabia Samoa spoke to journalists when they rounded off campaign at Amasaman and Trobu. And he says that the vice president has contributed nothing to the NPP. Here's what he told the media men in Accra.
Presidency. There is a pattern that emerges. Whenever you do something, patterns emerge. And you can tell from miles away that this is the process, but this is how it is likely to end. That's why we have polls and we have predictions. That is why there are those who are saying that though there are 10 people, there may be only 2 or 3 or 4 in the race. Patterns emerge. And in the NPP, one of the patterns is that the party rewards long service and commitment. And they can tell who has been in that process. And one of the ways of determining it is how often one has contested the leadership. And over the years, how patient one has been and how courageous one has been. If you recall, our current chairman contested over 5 times before he became chairman. Are you aware of that? So by the time he became chairman, what were they saying? That literally he was the one and nobody else. Did we say there wasn't going to be a contest? So there is going to be a contest. 10 people have filed, they've gone through vetting. So I'm assuming that if the vetting committee passes all of them, they will all be allowed to contest. But delegates are looking for certain things. Delegates are looking for longevity of service, commitment, sacrifices for the growth of the party. Delegates are looking for service to the party through the government. One's record in government, what one contributed to the party when in government. Delegates are looking at the vision of the candidate. As we are speaking, Alan Chemate has the clearest vision for the future of the party and the government. Alan says that he's going to resource and modernize our party. He's going to pay allowances, salaries, he's going to build structures, offices, and he's going to build capacity, technical capacity, in order to enable the party to mobilize better. The party understands that loud and clear, and they believe in it. Then he has a vision for the country, the great transformational plan, because his belief, and what we all know, is that this country is plagued by a lack of sustainable jobs. Jobs is the way going forward. Alan is the only candidate amongst the 10 who has a clear, proven record of creating structures for job creation. He creates structures that create jobs. He is not touting a personal record of a company or otherwise. He creates institutions and structures that create sustainable jobs. And that is where the country's vision is. That the great transformational plan will bring on board industrialization as a method for transitioning us from the Gaggisberg economy to a fully functional modern economy that has private sector capacity to create jobs.
Great, thank you.
It's my pleasure.
So you are the spokesperson for the campaign team?
Yes.
Okay, great.
Yeah, Bobby somewhat there, and like I keep saying, as and when details to come through, you get it here on Studios 2 Television. There's a special delegates conference on the 26th of August, but the expectation is that later today, the Elections Committee and the Vetting Committee of the New Patriotic Party will release a statement detailing all the candidates who passed the vetting. We know that 10 people have put themselves up wanting to lead the NPP as its flag bearer. That number could be trimmed down after the vetting, and so we'll get details much later today, I'm sure. We'll put it all out for you on Wednesday when we return with another edition of the show. We're ending with the former President John Dramani Mahama, who says that there's been a lot of talk about brilliant people leaving the country, particularly in the health front, that nurses continue to leave, a mass exodus of nurses. He says that all of this is attributable to poor management of the Ghanaian economy, which means that persons are unable to survive, hence the decision to leave. He's been speaking in the Ashanti region. Here's exactly what the former president has been saying.
Most Ghanaian youth, rightly disillusioned by the hopelessness engulfing our country, are prepared now to leave the country in search of greener pastures elsewhere. Not even the perilous nature of those journeys in this pursuit is enough to deter them. Many sectors, especially education and health, continue to lose many professionals who find the attraction of earning far more abroad than they do here too irresistible. This is a telltale sign of national failure and needs to be reversed as quickly as we can. The reality, however, is that no measure of confidence can be placed in this Akufo-Addo Bawumia government to be able to do this. The stark reality is that only a change of government through the 2024 elections can result in a change in the trajectory of this country, as the NPP has come to an end of the road in terms of any workable ideas. Yes, we must break the 8 years of corruption. Yes, we must break the 8 years of impunity and waste. Yes, we must break the 8 years of poor governance. Yes, we must break the 8 years of arrogance.
And so that's the former president, John Dramani Mahama. That's how we end today's edition of Let's Talk Ghana here on Studios 2 Television, which comes to you live on YouTube as well as on Facebook. We return on Wednesday, and it promises to be action-packed because we will get a full sense as to who is making it to the NPP's Special Delegates Conference on August 26th, and a host of other conversations. I am Eric Mawena Egbeta. A pleasure as always having you do the watching.
Studios 2 TV. The truth is here in your eyes.